Cool. Well, cheers to number 4.
Number 4,
And a sort of semi-wrap to an undefined series we've been doing. Not that it was necessarily a series, but I thought, we can do these sort of introductory type videos just to get a start. Right. And then, based on feedback we've gotten and probably will still receive, we can start predefining maybe little collections or series, if that's even a word. But I thought just sort of to wrap the first 4 up, to not get too technical. I know we discussed doing the chronograph last week, but I thought to postpone that into our next series where we can talk about watch functions and features.
Right.
But rather to just discuss, the topic of what is a watchmaker. Because I think, everyone's looking at the watchmaker talking, but no one really knows what a watchmaker necessarily is.
Right.
Or at least they think it's someone who fiddles with equipment and machinery that they don't understand in a corner somewhere.
Right.
But in your own terms, what exactly is a watchmaker?
Right. So the accepted norm for up to sort of maybe 20, 30 years ago was a crusty little chap in a basement somewhere, full of dust, fiddling with normally pocket watches and slightly larger mechanical devices, and then they sort of scaled it down to the smaller wrist-worn watches, and then the watchmaker and clockmaker used to be one of the same sort. They classify a clockmaker as a clockmaker, a watchmaker as a watchmaker and a clockmaker. The finer parts, the motor skills that you need for watchmaking are much finer than the bigger mechanical clocks. So you need a lot of dexterity. You also need a lot of fine motor skills and a load of patience. So what happened was, a watchmaker today is still the same as the watchmaker of a couple of 100 years ago. The only difference is, or the differences are, that there was a time where in England the watchmaker had to do every single job. They had to make the case, they had to make the dial, they had to make the parts, they had to put it all, marry it all together. And that's what they did. The Swiss then came around to realizing that almost like Henry Ford and his factory for cars, that they realized that if you have the one guy doing the one job, you're not going to get volumes out. So what happened was people specialized in making the dial, another person was specialized in making the hands, another making the wheels which go inside the watch, and then the outer cases. So each person had that, and what had normally happened and how it was born in Switzerland was that the farmers, they would, during winter time, it would all shut down. They couldn't come outside, and for months they were in an industry where they couldn't do what their normal daily job was. And that gave birth to this cottage industry of watchmaking, but each person getting a task. And then what happened was that then there were companies, or it grew into companies, that got together to put the whole lot together and then market it. And
so it was sort of treated initially, even by clockmakers, as a form of pastime.
It was.
And a lot of either scientists or horologists, which we can get into what that term really entails, would spend years refining and defining certain elements of a clock or a watch. Correct. And not per se focusing on like the production of or the maintenance of, but more so just the design or the architecture behind one specific thing. Correct. And then with like these guys, that you were saying they were maybe in agriculture or, what have you, and it closed up for half of the year. They would sit and play around with these mechanical devices in their pastime, in their free time. Now, how is that? If you go to a young technician or watchmaker today,
Yeah.
how do you think their definition of watchmaking would differ?
Right. So what happened was that the certain manufacturers, it became more and more, I suppose it wasn't cost effective for one person to make a part. So what happened was it became more mechanical, more people or more the manufactured would start making complete units, and other brands would put their name on a unit. It's like there's the Hoya caliber 11 that actually is the Hoya caliber 12 that it goes into the Breitling, and they call it the caliber 11. It's exactly the same movement. And this is what happened was certain manufacturers, and there were loads of them. The 80s, it died. There were loads of watch movement manufacturers. So what actually ended up happening was that the actual watchmaker themselves, and this is now the modern day watchmaker, we became fitters basically, where to sit behind a lathe to actually make a balance staff was very labor intensive, and the costs are massive. So to be able to buy these things off the shelf, and there will be one manufacturer making balance staff, there was a time where we had to fit the balance staff to the balance and fit all the springs and what have the hairspring and what have you now, and poise it all. Now you can get the whole the whole assembly just comes as one. So all you do is lower it in and regulate the balance. So you don't even need to do that anymore. The watchmaker's role, it's still, you when it comes to vintage parts, you still have to make certain parts. If you get water damaged watches and certain levers and things need to be polished, you still do all of that. But it really is more units that are being put in.
Basically, because I was going to ask what the difference between a technician and a watchmaker is, but what you've actually just said is basically all modern watchmakers are in some sense just technicians. Because what's happened is now that, you know, there's so much automation with part production, things like that.
Right.
They are ultimately just fitters.
Right.
Right. Not all of them, but a lot of the newer watchmakers are fitters.
Yes.
But yet the qualification required to be a watchmaker has become almost stricter in the sense that you'd go to university, which in the past it would just be an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Which probably in some sense still holds more value because you're actually practicing and practically doing it more so than not.
Correct.
So the educational part has become more serious,
yes,
but the practical part less serious.
Right.
So the technician and watchmaker difference, maybe hop onto that briefly, just to like sort of say, well, when someone says their watches with a technician and when someone says their watches with a watchmaker, what is really the true difference there?
Well, the true difference is, and to put it in layman's terms, if we're talking, let's just talk about a car engine. You can get the guy who will lift a car engine out of a car and then put another one in, plug it all together. He's not a mechanic.
Yeah.
Then you get the guy who can go right into the heart of that engine. He takes it apart. He balances everything, and that's where the watchmaker comes in. The true watchmaker, you still get them across the whole of Switzerland. Around the world, it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to have an entire workshop full of watchmakers any longer. That requirement, but this is where the snags come in, and this is where one has to be quite multifaceted, especially in watchmaking. So we are quite far away from the mothership being Switzerland, and because of that, people have to become self-sufficient in this area. So the making of parts is still quite prevalent, especially for the vintage stuff. And even in Switzerland now, even the vintage stuff are running out. So the people, I mean, a Swiss watch is basically good for parts for about 30 years after they've stopped production of that. Then, after 30 years, then parts are becoming harder and harder to find. So in the older days, you had to have you had to be a watchmaker, now you can be a technician, but where it differs is that you're not allowed to get parts from a manufacturer unless you've been to Switzerland on their watchmaking training courses. And that's where it does differ. Each manufacturer has their own way and they have their own certification.
Yeah.
And that
and just because we're the one doesn't mean you're other. You know, it's like you have to go on the training for each respective brand, unless there's some prearranged agreement that they recognize prior training or something.
And even on training, it's a case of the watchmaker doesn't make the parts anymore, but it really is how they want you to fine-tune their movement.
Yeah, the pre-existing movement.
The pre-existing.
So, you know, maybe that's... I see you've got this little book here in front of us.
I've got a book.
Why don't you show it up to the audience?
I will. So one of this is George Daniels' book on watchmaking. And I can tell you, if you go through this book, you will be able to make you'll be able to make a watch. It goes into every single thing you need to know about watchmaking, even down to the making of the tools to make the watch. Because sometimes you don't get a drill piece that size. You actually
you have to make
them.
it. Yeah.
So and that's what they used to do in the old days as well. You make the tools to make the watch.
Yeah.
And that's to me the art of it. George Daniels, he passed away, I think about 10 years ago now, but he was coming out of England, he's handed his knowledge and everything down to a couple of watchmakers, a chap called Smith in England, and he's carried on with all his equipment, but he's now got his own brand as well. But George Daniels was famous for the coaxial escapement, and nothing really had been invented since then and before there for years. So he invented the coaxial escapement. Is the escapement you'll find in an Omega watch now.
Yeah. Okay. And talking about watchmaking, and then the term horology comes up, right? Now, an horologist or someone who studies horology, can you be an horologist and not a watchmaker? Or generally were most horologists watchmakers too? Because if it's the study of time and the mechanics or the science behind it...
So horology studies time. The watchmakers make the device to actually measure the time.
Yeah.
And that's where...
So you can actually be an horologist per se, and not necessarily be a watchmaker.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But on that note as well, there's how we spoke last time about COSC, but it's a case of as well how when you say a meter is this long. How do you know it's that long? What gauges the length of a meter? And they in the old days it's still in the Système International in France is I think it's a platinum 1 meter long, and every single person or everything was measured to that 1 meter. And the same as with time. It's a case of how do you know 1 second's 1 second? So these devices have to be precisely made to measure time, and that's basically it. It's a case of what the horologist is about time, but what measures it?
Yeah, and who creates
and
the
who
device.
creates it? Correct.
Yeah. So that sort of gives us a good idea of sort of the differences between, say, technician, watchmaker, horology versus watchmaking, and how they interlink. Now, why did you become a watchmaker? So apart from your camera experience, etc., what really got you into the watchmaking part? Because I'm sure somewhere down the line you could have decided to rather just focus on the technician side of things if you really wanted to, without going into the heart of just the watchmaker.
Yeah, okay, so my whole thing is I have a passion for micromechanics. So when cameras became electronic, and it was just a case of plugging in boards and putting it on the computer and programming them, I completely lost interest in that. The micromechanics of watchmaking, you get watches that are so complex and that appealed to me. It wasn't just the normal 3-hand watch, which appealed to begin with, but I think I'm definitely the fastest that's gone from a 3-hand to a chronograph on the course with Breitling. They'd never had somebody in that time span getting qualified in that. Normally there's about a 5-year gap between that, and it was just my passion. I had the opportunity to go, and I wanted to learn more and more and more. A funny story was that on one of the courses, this particular watch I'm wearing at the moment is a 1461, and there was just no way of me going on a course for this 1461 because so few were sold in South Africa. So what happened was I bought myself a watch so I could take it apart and learn it.
Yeah, that's classic.
and it's you know, how else does one do it?
Yeah.
Fortunately now, with the amount of watches that we get in here and the amount of complicated watches that we get to see an awful lot. And each thing one has to know that it's being done to a Swiss standard.
Yeah.
And
Okay, no, very nice. So I think, you know, we can keep this one short and sweet. It's just sort of like a wrap on the first 4. But whoever's watching this is welcome to comment and give us some ideas of, say, sort of set series on watchmaking we can do. We are thinking about doing more external and then internal functions of watches as different series. But I think going forward we'll just keep things rolling, and it's been good so far.
Brilliant.